I'm Al Toddenham. I will be your host here this evening, and also a good friend of our feature artist, Paul Oman. His wife is doing her due diligence behind the canvas to kind of hold things in place. Years back, Paul came to Hastings from the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, as a student teacher. And I had the privilege of being his supervising teacher for that period of time. Paul comes to us tonight from Deer Park, Wisconsin, where he lives on a small acreage with his wife and 3 children. Since he was a young boy, by the age of 10, he started taking art classes and continued to do so through college, along with taking up a science education major. Hence his student teaching period of time in Hastings. After a few years of teaching in the Hopkins School District, his call was to go to Luther Seminary. And there he finished his fields of study with a master's in divinity and became a pastor. He went up to northwest Wisconsin for 6 years, and at that time, he began to find a coordination between applying visual arts to the audience, along with the message that he was using at that time. Presently, Paul is a signature member of the National Watercolor Society with a career as a live audience mural presentation artist, as well as a demonstrator, a teacher, and a speaker. We will continue with our presentation as we watch Paul doing his thing, and I'm going to try to do my thing. Okay, Paul's mission is to touch lives in the painting that he is doing. And I am going to go to my good backup, written out piece of paper so that I can figure out where we're going. Paul's mission is to touch lives with changing emotion that comes through the sharing of his artistic gifts. Please welcome Paul Oman.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Al. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here on this warm and windy day in Hastings. Great to be back here in Hastings. I'm really excited to paint a scene for you this evening. I don't want to give it away. I'll talk at the end just a little bit. But I had the opportunity to be here in Hastings for a day and meet at the courthouse and meet a few people and talk through the history and some of the historical events and the cultural diversity over the years here in Hastings. And that is what I'm going to attempt to depict as some of your history and to bring that all together. And while I'm painting, there'll be some speakers here that'll be sharing a little bit about the history. And again, a special thank you to my wife. I feel really bad for her to be sitting back there, but I hope you enjoy. I'll talk to you at the end.
We have 2 objectives that become the reasons for tonight's program. The first is to lift up visual art in public places as something that not only benefits but inspires a community to a higher plane of representing itself. Our second objective is intended to remind ourselves that historically, the community of Hastings enjoyed a multicultural existence, just as it does today. In keeping with our objective of lifting up the arts in Hastings, I am pleased to introduce to you tonight Estrella Carter, a resident of ArtSpace. Welcome, Estrella.
I'm Estrella Carter, and I'm so thankful for this opportunity to be involved with the Drawn to the River and helping cultivate diversity and creativity in Hastings community. I'm not here today to give history, but I'm here to share my experience of moving here to Hastings 5 years ago as an artist. I am an artist and entrepreneur living with my family in the arts space Hastings River Lofts. I was raised here in Minnesota, and I come from a family full of self-made entrepreneurs. My grandmother, Maureen Flores, began with no college education, but went on to run a successful restaurant called La Cucaracha Restaurant in St. Paul. And my mother and my aunt followed her footsteps. My grandmother encouraged me to pursue a higher education, which led to me receiving a master's degree in social work. In my 15-year career, social work allowed me to be a force for positive development, supporting the many diverse, hopefully my dress doesn't fly up. So anyways, my 15-year career in social work allowed me to be a force for positive development, supporting the many diverse communities in Minnesota to meet their basic needs, find employment, ensure housing stability. In 2014, I decided to step out of my role in social work and pursue my dream of expanding my business. And that same year, I became aware of a new housing community designed to support and empower artists as they pursue their creative endeavors. I seized the opportunity to move to ArtSpace Hastings, seeing it as a door to growing my creative business in home staging and catering services. When COVID brought the world and my business to a halt, I saw yet another opportunity to get creative, expand my business, and create a greater impact in the world. I am proud to say I earned my real estate license online during COVID, and now I help families from all walks of life navigate home ownership and have been able to continue my creative passions through boutique catering for housewarming parties and decorating services. One of the most powerful things I've discovered as a resident of ArtSpace is that what it means to be an artist is as beautifully diverse as the people themselves. In this community, I've fostered new friendships, and we have been able to empower each other through collaborations and networking, striving to embody the idea that when one rises, we all rise. When a neighbor moved to a nursing home, I was able to throw a birthday party for her twin daughters, enlisting the support of another neighbor named Tony Geving, who created a TikTok selfie backdrop that was the highlight for the 14-year-old girls. When my husband struggled with his arthritis, I called on my neighbor Simone Rendon, an indigenous artisan who produces cottage foods and medicinals, and she provided her bear grease, which has become a staple in our lives. When I needed business cards, Tyler and Talea from Whole Time created beautiful, high-quality prints for me with lightning speed. During my first annual fall celebration at ArtSpace, my creative neighbors came out in force to support the vision, especially Michael Buford, who was up early with my husband to make sure everything was set up. Andy Evanson offered watercoloring activities, Tom Wen donated his artwork for a prize drawing, and Mitch Lundgren, who brought her professional photography background to capture the fun. I couldn't have done it without them. Choosing to make Hastings my home has also meant the opportunity to connect with organizations like HPAC and their members, Kathy O'Keefe, who helped to make the fall celebration an amazing event, and Dick Graham and Pat Powers helping me make connections throughout the town. I have been living here for 5 years now, and I have been able to support and be supported by neighbors here in Hastings. I would once again like to thank Glenda for the opportunity to be involved in this event and to help our town strengthen itself through diversity and inclusion and commitment to helping one another to rise. Thank you.
Our next guest this evening is a well-known Hastings historian. Heidi Langenfeld, included in Paul's painting, will be the imaging of Hastings' earliest occupants, the Dakota Sioux. In Heidi's research, she's uncovered many interesting facts and information about their life on the land that we now occupy. Please welcome Heidi Langenfeld.
As Al said, we do want to honor the people who called this land their home before the European settlers came along after the treaty in 1851. There was never actually a village established, a permanent village established here in Hastings. But along the Mississippi, down south, there was Wabashaw's village, and then coming up north next was Red Wings village. And then they would pass through Hastings to Kaposha, which was Little Crow's village. And then on up to Minnesota River, where Black Dog was in Burnsville, what is now today Burnsville. So I'm going to focus on the Kaposha village and introduce you to a young girl that I met during my research. Her name was Marie Louisa Angelique Skaya. Her father was Big Thunder, Chief Little Crow IV. Her mother was Gray Chin Woman. They lived in Kaposha, which is just about 9 miles north of here and on the Mississippi. In the summer, the band of Indians that lived there and called it home lived full-time in bark longhouses. But they didn't spend, that was mostly the only time they stayed in camp there, because they were hunters and gatherers. That was how they kept themselves alive, and it was their way of living and honoring or using nature, hunting and gathering for food. So in the late fall, they would start looking towards going out into the hunting grounds. And in order to do that, they had to be ready to go at all times. And so they were very adept at packing up and moving at a moment's, well, no, they knew they were going to go. But the children would help with that. So Marie Louisa and her siblings would all help. They were part of the hustle and bustle of breaking camp and taking the poles that would be used to make teepees. Their winter campground was in teepees, and they would use the poles that were holding the teepee up, and they would form like a, if you can visualize, pulling them behind them and lashing everything they needed onto those poles, which would be the buffalo skins, and then they would come down the trail and be going down the Mississippi, but they did not come in canoes, they came on foot. And as they came around the corner here, Maria Louisa probably recognized that they had been here earlier in the summer, maybe in June or July, because this was the place they called Oababdi. That was the Indians' name for where we live right now, before it was called Hastings. Oababdi translates into the place where they dig Tipsina. Tipsina was a turnip type of a root that grows up on along the Vermilion River, just east of the waterfalls, and it still grows there today. Spencer Johnson has dug some for different events that we've had. And so I can just visualize them walking along here with all of their gear, and probably on the other side of the river where there is a trail, because a lot of those where they walked with their trails ended up being roads, like Highway 61. So Maria Louisa and after they came back from the winter hunting grounds, and they would get back to their camp in Kaposha in time for the women to plant their corn crop. The women were responsible for the gathering and growing of the crops, and the men did the hunting, and they all shared the food together. In the spring and March then, they would be coming back over here along the river down right about where Lake Rebecca is. There was a whole big orchard of maple trees. And this was where they came to tap the maple trees to make their sugar, maple sugar, and have that for the season. Well, Maria Luisa grew into her obituary says, an imposing woman who caught the eye of a French-Canadian man by the name of Morand. And he was had come from Canada early on and was one of the first settlers in Pig's Eye Island, which turned into St. Paul. And he was working with Henry Sibley, and Henry wanted some property from the natives to build his trading post and his house. So he came to the village and caught sight of Marie and fell in love with her, and they were married. So they made their home on Pig's Eye after their marriage and had lived there until about 1860, when they ended up on a farm in Le Sueur. They had 13 children, 3 sons and 10 daughters. Their second daughter, Rosa, moved to St. Paul when she matured and worked as a servant there. There she met and married David Weldon. David was a former slave, born in Missouri, freed by his owner at his owner's death, and then he moved to Michigan. He served in the Civil War, Company K, 102nd U.S. Colored Troops. He was mustered out in 1865. Later, he ended up in in St. Paul, where he met Rosa. And then they married and lived between Hastings and St. Paul for all those years, for 20 years actually. David was listed in the city dictionary, city directories as a porter at one of the big companies up there. But he also was here in Hastings doing odd jobs for people. The Hastings paper reported one incident where he had gone out with his sons, 2 of his sons, Harry and Frederick, and they were cutting wood and getting it ready for Mr. Lyons. And they were down at Treadell's Slough, and the fire that they were using, I think they were burning and making coal out of the wood. It got out of control, and it burnt down the shed that they were staying in, and they were able to save their lives. So from that, we know that he was here in Hastings too at the same time as in St. Paul. Rosa was here with her children and raised them, and during all those years, remember, Rosa is a Native American. Her mother is an Indian princess because her father was a chief. So her, Rosa's grandfather was Chief Little Crow. Every year they would go to Pine Coulee and register for the American Indian census rolls. And they raised their children here in Hastings. An interesting thing is in 1900, 2 of their children, Harry and his sister Louisa, were living at the Indian boarding school in Morris, Minnesota. So they went to that school for a couple of years, but they came back here to Hastings. And so these notes are difficult to follow when you don't. David and Rosa belonged to the the African Methodist Episcopal Church here in Hastings. And when he died, April of 1903, the funeral was held at Brown's Chapel, and he is buried at St. Luke's. Then in August of the same year, Angeline, who at the end of her life, Maria Luisa started calling herself Angeline, which her full name had been Angelique Skaya. And she died, and her obituary talked about how she was such, early in St. Paul, how she had been involved with Henry Sibley and lived her whole life there. It was a pretty interesting obituary. 80 of her descendants were at the funeral. She had 163 descendants, but they could not all be there, it said. So Rosa lost her mother and her husband in the same month, in the same year, just a couple months apart. But she still had her large family. And this 119 years after the death of Marie Louise Angelique Skaya, daughter of Chief Little Crow V, we know that there are many descendants, many more descendants than those 163. Tonight we're honoring the diversity of our past, of our history here in Hastings. And one of the things that I like about the research that I found on this family, and I only did the tip of the iceberg, there's so many great stories about them, but how diverse this family is. An Indian princess married a French-Canadian man. They had 13 children. One of those children married a black man who had been a slave. And then they had a large family. And of those children of Rosa and Amble Morand, many of those married white settlers' children. There's really familiar names like Rother and Siebenaller in that family tree. So I just feel that family is an example of the diversity that we have. And some of the people that wrote about the history of the Indians, like in 1881, they said, so many things have changed, but probably the biggest change is that the Indian is no more. The Indian will not be missed. And it was a very short-sighted thing for that person to say, because already at that time, they were right. The Indians, the Dakota, had been sent out of Minnesota, but many of them lived on in the marriages that they had, the descendants that they had. Then in 1881, some came back to Minnesota and purchased property, and now we have Prairie Island. And we're so fortunate that we live still close enough that we can honor the history and learn from them their traditions, and they're being passed on in their families and with their languages and everything. So that's just a little bit about the family of David and Rosa Weldon.
As Paul is developing tonight's painting, it will include a representation of a time when Hastings had a community of African American citizens. After some time, they acquired their own house of worship that is known as Brown's Chapel. A descendant of that community is here to tell us a little bit about Brown's Chapel and why we're even speaking about it tonight. Please welcome James Curry.
Thank you. And thanks, Glenda. Yeah, I'll freestyle a little bit here, but there was basically two big families, black families in the 1890s, I would say. The Wallace family and the Curry family. The Wallace family had a son named James, and the Currys had about 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls. One of them was a valedictorian at Hastings High School. 5 of them graduated with honors. Active members of the community. The Currys themselves came from Virginia, and the Wallaces came from Kentucky. And 2 of their houses are still standing on 4th and River, if you want to check them out. Both built by both the Wallace men and James Curry. But they worshipped at the Methodist church until about 1890, when they decided to build a church of their own. They solicited subscriptions from the community, from Prescott, Point Douglas, Trimble, and the city responded. There was a German Baptist church that had been abandoned and on the corner of 5th and Sibley. And I think it was $500 they needed. $200 down payment was required before they could enter. So the town responded. They got enough money to have a church of their own in 1892. I want to say in July, they had a grand opening. Folks from Minneapolis and the Twin Cities came down. Part of the choir, other pastors did their thing and read from the scripture, and evidently it was a grand day, a red letter day they called it in the Hastings Gazette, and the church prospered. It was a place for weddings, funerals, gatherings, lawn picnics and socials. Not a whole lot of records in the paper about the events, but a few here and there about weddings and funerals. But they had a female pastor and visiting pastors. So it was kind of a progressive little church, Brown's Chapel. But maybe as a sign of the times, 15 years later, right after their probably 15th anniversary, last week in October, around Halloween, it was noted that a sash was lifted in the back window. Arsonists had entered it and poured kerosene on the pews, the floor, the ceiling, and the walls, and lit it on fire. And the Gazette and the Hastings Democrat responded. They said that the fire was put out, but the building was damaged beyond repair, and they had no insurance. So I imagine that last week in October, some heartbreak in the black community that was here. And I want to say the figures are around 35 people, but it was also folks from Wisconsin that joined the congregation. So there was an emptiness, I'm sure, to say the least. And there was some silence from the community that was once welcoming. And the silence continued. There was no further investigation. Both papers concluded with the help of the fire department that it was the work of incendiaries. So I imagine the next few weeks was about slinking back to churches that maybe weren't so welcoming. And I say slinking back because ultimately one of the pastors of the Methodist Church became a Klan chaplain, if you could imagine that. So there was some heartbreak, I'm sure, and silence from the community that they probably thought might help fundraise and maybe even start another one. It's unfortunate. It's a sign of those times. The Klan was rising. We had the Red Summer of 1919. We had Tulsa. We had the Rise of the Klan due to Birth of a Nation film. And so hearts turned cold in Hastings. The Currys and Wallace, thankfully, I think John Wallace, one of the founders, passed on in 1900. But James Curry and John Wallace's, their wives were also trustees in that church. So they continued on. James Curry, my great-grandpa, was a janitor at Hastings High School. I don't know are they called Huskies or anything like that? Or Raiders. Okay. Was known as Smilin' Jim, a man who was always genial and a well-liked citizen. And in 1933, when he passed, the town shut down, closed their businesses, and he lie in state in the high school. And I've read of children, visiting his body, as well as being eulogized by Larry Hodgson, or Larry Ho, a former St. Paul mayor. So I come to Hastings, with an open mind. But there is some tragedy that occurred here, and I think I still feel that kind of stuff in my blood. But the folks that I've met here since I've started a relationship with our organization, BR4R, with Heidi Langenfeld and Rich Mankey and Deb Saunders and Andy Bidman and many others, Jackie Northwood. And I feel welcome, and I feel that Hastings has aspirations to live up to their welcoming and inclusive aspirations to live up to their aspirations. So thank you, Glenda, and God bless.
Our final messenger about art in Hastings is a board member of the well-known Hastings-Prescott Area Arts Council. His name is Stephen Reed. HPAC is the organization which has done a great deal to bring art in all its forms to the Hastings community. Please welcome Stephen Reed.
Thank you, Al. Hi, I'm Stephen Reed, a resident of Hastings, a visual artist, a local realtor, a member of BR4R and the Hastings Arts Task Force, and a board member of the Hastings Prescott Arts Council, known as HPAC. My family moved to Hastings for the community, and I am proud to see the arts thriving in our beautiful historic river town. I am here today as a representative of HPAC, and to tell you all about the work that this organization has done for our community. HPAC was founded in 2008 as a grassroots campaign started by our own citizens who loved and recognized the power of the arts in our community. The goal of HPAC is to organize and promote the arts and to work collaboratively with all the different community organizations, whether they be private, public, or governmental. Our belief that the arts are essential to strive to build the arts in Prescott and Hastings and the surrounding area. We are fortunate that we have access to a diverse and rich arts community, and HPAC is here to help and maintain and nurture that. HPAC has a long history of impacting our arts community. HPAC was there to organize the River Valley Band, which continues to fill our community with beautiful music for everyone. Our partnership with Prescott led us to the establishment of the Orange Dragon Art Gallery, which presents arts and gifts made by local community members. In 2013, HPAC initiated conversations between ArtSpace and the City of Hastings to bring artist housing to our community. In 2016, this was realized in a 37-unit building overlooking our beloved river. This building is home to an amazing group of local artists. In 2015, HPAC initiated an arts scholarship. This program provides funds for area members to take lessons in many forms of art, like music, dance, and fine art. Currently, HPAC is a sponsor of the Rec Art and Police program in partnership with the City of Hastings and sponsors SC Toys and County Financial, where local kids can experience free art workshops in our wonderful parks. This program started off with a bang, drawing well over 100 kids. In 2020, HPAC published the Hastings' Arts Report, a document investigating the impact that the arts has in and around our community. The report reinforced something that we all know, that not only does the arts provide a social benefit to Hastings, but it also provides an economic one as well. This work led to the Hastings Arts Task Force, a group of Hastings volunteers who were tasked by the City Council to determine whether the City of Hastings needed and would benefit from an Arts Culture Commission. The Arts Task Force, comprised of 9 Hastings residents, started meeting at the beginning of February 2022, and every other week from then on to tackle this question. The task force determined that not only would the Arts and Culture Commission benefit Hastings, but it is truly needed. The Arts and Culture Commission would advise the City Council concerning arts and cultural policies, public projects, issues, and initiatives. The Commission will advocate for arts and culture in Hastings and will continue to ensure that Hastings is arts. We presented our findings to the City Council, and they unanimously voted to send the recommendation and accompanying documents to the Planning Committee, the first step in a process to make the Arts and Cultural Commission a reality. I encourage you, as community members who care about the arts, to reach out to all our amazing City Council members and relate to them your stories of how the arts have improved our city. how city support with the Arts Commission will continue to build up our arts community, and how the Commission will be able to help the city find new ways to give back to our community and our citizens, to give us more opportunities to live a vibrant life with the arts and leave a legacy for future generations, one that honors our past, but builds on a better community for all. Thank you, Glenda, and thank you, Al. Thank you all.
In all that we've shared tonight, it's important that you know where this picture is going to hang. One of Hastings' public settings is that of Hastings Family Service. Family Service is prepared to welcome the painting to its setting tonight. Over time, it's possible that the painting will become part of other public venues in Hastings. The message of this custom work of Paul Oman is timeless. Hastings' natural beauty of its topography, together with its landmarks, and accented with the reminder that other cultures also called this bend in the Mississippi home, calls for our respect and our lasting regard. At this time, I would like to thank Paul Oman, who agreed to this invitation, our speakers, Estrella Carter, Heidi Langenfeld, Stephen Reed, and James Curry, for their information that they have given us. And I thank you, the audience, for coming this evening. I know it's hot, but I hope you found it inspiring and meaningful as we work together for an even more beautiful and progressive city. At this time, Paul has a few words that he would like to say. About 5 minutes. We'll get 5 minutes of music, and then we'll give it back to Paul.
We were trying.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so interesting to hear about the history of your community and just learning about it. Our communities are so diverse and rich, and we take the time to go back and learn about them. And my fear as an artist is misrepresenting something, since I come out of a particular culture and background. So I sure hope that isn't the case. And if it is, I hope someone would say something to me. So it's acrylic paint. I can make corrections anytime. But it was so much fun trying to imagine historically what the community of Hastings perhaps was like. And looking back at old photos of the Dakota people and photos that were representative of the Dakota in this area, and that of Brown's Chapel, which we were unable to find a full photo of it. Is that correct, James? But there was just a partial photo in one of the newspapers. I think it was pictured in 1949, and that photo was brought up historically, correct? And it was just a bottom portion, and it looked to me like there was an entrance and then a little bit of a larger building, perhaps, but that may not be historically accurate. But nonetheless, the most important part are the people, and the beautiful people that have been a part of making Hastings what it is. And so I know that the native people spend time fishing, from what we learned, perhaps with spears, we thought, most likely. And so I attempted to depict 3 fish on the left side there, if you're wondering what those shapes are. And the old spiral bridge. And I really enjoy depicting people looking out into a scene, and I think there's a sense of wonderment or concern, or it gives us a sense that people are thinking about something, or they're on their way somewhere. But in the lower left is the train, comes to the depot right over here. And there people are both getting on and getting off the train. So it's just a sign or a sense that Hastings wasn't a static, and is not a static community, but people come and go, different backgrounds, and they merge together. In the lower right, the African American community I attempted to depict there using some photos and some interpretive imagination, along with the mill in the upper right, representing agriculture, and a bald eagle soaring in the upper left above the Mississippi River. And of course, your courthouse that's in the center here. Without over-explaining a painting, that's usually the death of the painting, I like to leave room for the imagination. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for being here tonight, and for your respectful attention and engagement, and the importance of the messages that were shared tonight. And thanks to all of you for sharing.
So Paul is going to be here for a moment with his lovely wife Jana, who will keep the painting still for him.
Thanks, you guys. It's amazing. What an artist. Holy cow.
To Amy here, you have something to say.